So let's start off today's video by talking a bit about factitious medical disorders. Factitious disorders are conditions in which a person deliberately and consciously acts as if he or she has a physical or mental illness when he or she is not really sick. And why might someone fake an illness? Well, the prevailing theory is that the primary aim is to obtain sympathy in addition to the attention and nurturing that one normally receives from others when they are ill. These people will go to extreme lengths to prove others that they are really sick when in fact they aren't, from complaining of fake pains all the way to feigning symptoms of severe mental illnesses like schizophrenia. Now, with the concept of factitious disorders briefly explained, I'd like you to meet the subject of today's video. Meet Desiree Jennings. In 2009, Jennings made national news headlines after she developed symptoms which mimicked a rare neuromuscular disorder after receiving a flu vaccine. And as you can see here by the clip playing, the symptoms were pretty extreme. There were many out there though that thought that this woman was a fraud and that her symptoms were completely made up for attention. And today I'm here to break down this whole Desiree Jennings flu shot debacle for you guys. Was it a hoax? Before we get into the story, I want to thank the Ridge for sponsoring today's video. They make these sleek metallic wallets. This one is the aluminum gunmetal variant. I've been using Ridge wallets for a few months now and there's really no going back. On their website, you'll find that they have different types of metals and materials that you can choose from. There's something there for everyone. I personally recommend the aluminum gunmetal and the burnt titanium. I've got a 10% off code that you guys can take advantage of in the description box. That's ridgewallet.com/wavy and use code WAVY to get 10% off of your order, and that includes free worldwide shipping, so check that out. Anyways, on to the story. In 2009, 25-year-old Desiree Jennings was performing exceptionally well in life. She had recently landed her dream job in marketing and was working simultaneously as the cheerleader ambassador for the Washington Redskins. And on top of that, she had just gotten married to a successful businessman. She was physically fit and in peak health. But everything would change for Jennings in late August of 2009 after she went to a local Safeway Supermarket for her annual flu vaccine. In the days following her getting a flu vaccine, she began to develop some extremely bizarre symptoms. She was speaking in a European/Australian sounding accent, flailing her arms and legs spastically while walking forward, and claimed that she lost the ability to read. Shocking video footage of the woman's symptoms were shown to the American public via the means of an Inside Edition report covering her case.
You can't control it, the muscles, everything just shakes.
She could run and walk sideways, but not straight ahead.
Her symptoms kept progressively getting worse.
I'm not the type of person to sit and watch TV, sit around on the couch. I have to be busy, productive, and, accomplishing something. Otherwise, I get very bored.
Could this be that same woman? Desiree, one day the picture of health, and the next a twisted, stuttering, fainting vision of pain and suffering.
I certainly try to remember stuff.
How did this happen? Desiree blames the dramatic change in what should have been a routine flu shot last fall.
The story would become a national sensation and inadvertently created a new wave of flu vaccine paranoia. As the story would continue to develop, Jennings would publicly claim that she received the diagnosis of dystonia from a physical therapist, which is pretty strange because, as far as I'm aware, physical therapists cannot give you a medical diagnosis, at least in the United States. But anyways, what the hell is dystonia? Dystonia is a rare movement disorder in which a person's muscles contract uncontrollably. The contraction causes the affected body part to twist involuntarily, resulting in repetitive movements or abnormal postures. And a diagnosis of dystonia is congruent with some of the symptoms displayed by Jennings, such as the spastic arm and leg movements during locomotion. But the majority of her symptoms, such as the European and sometimes Australian sounding accent, are not related to the disorder. It is possible for someone to develop slurred speech, but that wasn't the case here. Medical experts who were skeptical of the woman and her claims were quick to point out that the extreme coordination deficits displayed by Jennings in the Inside Edition video clips would be comparable to someone with an extremely advanced case of dystonia. The disease itself is progressive in nature and causes deterioration over time, not within a period of days like in the case of what Jennings was experiencing.
Dr. Stephen Novella is an assistant professor of neurology at Yale, and he's followed Desiree's case on the internet closely. He's comfortable commenting from afar because dystonia is primarily a visual diagnosis.
Now, I never examined her and I never claimed to come to any kind of a clinical diagnosis of her, but what I did say was the movements that she's displaying in those videos is not dystonia. For example, while she was having fairly dramatic whole body movements, she was still able to maintain her balance in a very precarious way.
Even more puzzling was the claim that Jennings could walk normally if she walked sideways or backwards. And whenever she walked sideways or backwards, her speech just magically cleared up and went back to normal with no accent.
She has to go up and down stairs backwards because something as simple as walking forward can be dangerous. And here's the unusual part about the disorder. Take a look at this. Desiree can run just fine. It's only when she stops. You see, that's where the spasms start. Now you can walk backwards though, and it'll make it better, right? Yeah. She runs with a normal stride, and as I ran with her, she even spoke normally. And now you can talk.
Yeah, it's weird. It fixes as soon as I start running.
I mean, you sound.
I know, it's great, isn't it?
You sound amazing. And then you stop, and that's what happens.
I think by now you're beginning to understand the picture here. Something about this woman and her story was fishy. Jennings seemed suspiciously eager to appear on television programming, and there were reports floating around the news industry from people who had been in contact with the woman in person, and they claimed that her symptoms would become exaggerated when the cameras were turned on. Even more strangely, in the midst of all this, she participated in a 7-mile marathon shortly after her first round of media appearances, and she claimed she was able to do this because her symptoms cleared up whenever she started running. At one point, do we just stop and think to ourselves, hey, is this woman just completely crazy and she's making all of this shit up for attention? This was certainly becoming the consensus at the time. As more expert reports emerged doubting Jennings' claim to dystonia, the public's sympathetic attitude towards her began to wane and she quickly was becoming a laughingstock. People began posting reaction commentary videos which made fun of the woman's walk on YouTube.
Do you think that if she was ugly, she would get this much publicity?
And you even had a few meme remixes being created as well, such as the Walk It Out remix.
Hey, now walk it out, 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 now walk it out.
While public opinion began to sway against Jennings and she was being collectively goofed on by the internet, the folks over at the Inside Edition were several weeks deep into a project which they hope when finished would expose the truth about the woman and her claims. Inside Edition had been covertly filming Desiree Jennings out in public spaces across a span of a couple of weeks, and during their undercover filming operation they discovered that when Jennings thought no one was filming her, she magically had no symptoms.
But look at Jennings now. Inside Edition supplied this video of her walking normally, playing with her dogs, shopping, and even driving. Inside Edition had been secretly taping Jennings for weeks.
We've been trying to reach you and you have not been returning our phone calls.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What's going on? It looks like you've made a complete recovery.
Well, I don't want to say complete recovery. I still have a lot of cognitive issues. I mean, people are free to believe whatever they want, but, you know, I mean, clearly what I've been going through, I know it's not psychogenic, and it's not a hoax.
By now, you've probably noticed Jennings spoke with a foreign accent that she'd never had before.
I'm from Ohio. I should not be talking like this.
One more thing to notice, when Inside Edition first approached Jennings in this parking lot, she seemed to be walking normally. But after their interview, she walked to her car sideways, saying it was dystonia.
Yeah, Inside Edition busted this girl. She got caught red-handed. All of her symptoms had mysteriously cleared up when she thought that nobody was looking. This interview alone was pretty much confirmation that this woman was off her rocker and had made all this stuff up in her head. A Center for Disease Control report, which was published around the time of the Inside Edition expose, further undermines the woman's claim of dystonia. Here's the CDC report, which denies the flu vaccine could cause any of the woman's symptoms, and also contains the history and physical note from the neurologist who examined Jennings when she first displayed symptoms. Patient began experiencing difficulty walking, chills, sweats, tremors, and vivid dreams with difficulty sleeping. She began having headaches described as a cold spot on the back of her head, had subsequently developed a stutter, but was able to speak clearly if she whispered. Her symptoms persisted and progressed to erratic movements of the toe, intermittent uncontrolled blinking, difficulty focusing, uncontrolled shaking, cold feet, and sharp pains in the legs. Upon this admission, the plan was to rule out Guillain-Barré syndrome, multiple sclerosis, malignancy, Lyme disease, and myasthenia gravis. Patient noted to have dystonia, speech dysfunction, gait dysfunction, anxiety, shortness of breath, photophobia, tinnitus of the left ear, and increase in appetite, a 2-pound weight loss. It was also noted that the symptoms were worsened by warm water, especially at the knees. The admitting neurologist felt that there was a strong psychogenic component to the symptomology and made a final diagnosis of weakness. Basically, Jennings had seen a neurologist and the doctor had attributed all of her symptoms to being psychogenic in nature. When a disorder is labeled psychogenic, that means the problems are believed to be arising from emotional or mental stressors or from psychological or psychiatric disorders. And really, I hate using layman's terms when referring to medicine or medical terminology, but really what's going on here is this neurologist felt as though that Desiree Jennings really had no actual problem. She was pretty much just making all of this up in her head. Despite the overwhelming evidence that Jennings did not contract dystonia from the flu shot, she continued with the narrative. She claimed that her symptoms were cured after receiving treatments from a doctor who engaged in alternative medicine. Dr. Rashid Buttar ran an alternative medicine clinic and admitted Jennings as one of his patients. Dr. Buttar would go on to administer a series of intravenous chelation therapy to Jennings. Chelation therapy is thought to remove toxic metals from the bloodstream, such as mercury. Dr. Buttar administered the chelation therapy believing that the symptoms she was experiencing were related to mercury found inside of the flu shot. Ever since receiving this, Jennings has associated Dr. Buttar's chelation therapy as the explanation for her symptoms disappearing. And as soon as Desiree Jennings' walk switched from that of a spastic gait to something more normal and cured, the public just kinda stopped giving a crap about her. And after the media circus that was the Jennings flu vaccine debacle, she's practically fallen off the face of the earth with virtually no information regarding her personal life being available past 2010. I think you would be justified to call what Jennings did a hoax. But before you walk away from the video thinking that, I want to reinforce that the neurologist deducted that her symptoms were psychogenic. This implies that Jennings may have actually had some sort of underlying mental disorder that could have been causing attention-seeking behavior like this. She very well may have some sort of mental illness that pushed her to engage in this sort of behavior, and it could have possibly been out of her control. But that's just me playing devil's advocate. For all we know, she could have been out here just wanting some of that clout. Well, anyways, guys, what do you think about Desiree Jennings in the 2009 flu shot debacle that she went through? Was it a hoax? Was the woman just crazy? Or did the doctor's medically unproven chelation therapy just magically work? Let me know what you think in the comments section. Major shout out to my patrons, wavywebsurf out. Peace.